is Michael Ross. I am a painter. That is mostly what I do, and I also run a gallery in Highland Park called the Annex Gallery. I guess what I think of when I look at a lot of my work in general, many of them are completely non-representational, but especially when I'm looking at it all together, I sort of see them as landscapes a lot of the time. And I see them specifically as like seascapes. Most of my influences really, if I had to say, are more in the realm of music. I think of my work as being fairly musical, like Yoko Ono and John Cage and Steve Reich, Fela Kuti, people like that. There are a lot of parallels with music and visual art for me, and I think in a lot of the music that I listen to and the music that I tend to make, for me it has a lot to do with pattern, repetition, that idea of music as something that is a sculpture itself that you can sort of build on. There are layers to it. I mean, I've been a painter for as long as I've been making art, but I've always been interested in sculpture too, and I think as a painter, I tend to work with forms, and I think it was a logical leap, I guess, as I'm painting these forms, to sort of say, the canvas doesn't have to be square, it doesn't have to be a rectangle. Why not have the canvas echo some of the forms that are happening in the painting? One of my jobs as a painter is to make a set of rules and then sort of figure out interesting ways to break them. I'm creating the form out of the canvas, and then, of course, the painting goes completely away from that form, which I think adds an interesting amount of tension, I guess you'd say. Colors are just endlessly fascinating. The way that they can sort of talk to each other when two colors are next to each other and they don't make any sense together. They almost create another color in between them, even when there's no space in between them. And just the way they sort of talk to each other. I always think it's fascinating to use like a sort of toned down color palette, and then it's fascinating to use a brighter color palette and see how those two things can sort of talk to each other. As far as I'm concerned, there are no rules about colors, just like there are no rules in music. I clearly didn't go to art school. I think representational art, I'm always drawn back to it, especially like people and the human form, face and figure. Painting that sort of thing, it's almost like it massages the brain in some sort of a funny way. Non-representational art, I think, works on a similar plane, but in a completely different sort of a way, where if there's not something that a viewer's mind can grab onto and say like, oh, this is a duck or whatever, I think it really opens up the mind and allows you to sort of just explore your mind a little bit, In a lot of my work, I like to have a sort of completely abstract thing going on, and then there might be something very specific within that kind of almost catches the brain a little bit, and maybe it's kind of disorienting in a fun way. Well, I think art is so much about what the viewer sees. Especially with abstract art, you're sort of seeing a reflection of yourself anytime you're looking at something. The way you see it, the way you think about it, it tells you more about yourself, I think, than it maybe even does about the artist. So I think art is 50-50, I think it's what the artist puts into it, and it's also what the viewer gets out of it, and what the viewer puts into it as well. I think when people come to see this show, I hope that they come away with a positive viewpoint. To me, my work is about hopefully uplifting the human spirit a little bit, creating a little bit of joy. That's the way I like to think about it. That's what I tend to get out of it as I'm painting. I hope that's what other people get from it too.